At 12:50 in the afternoon on Friday, March 28, 2025, a security camera mounted at a solar energy facility in Myanmar's Mandalay region was recording its ordinary feed when the ground moved. Not shook, moved. The earth on the left side of the camera's frame began sliding laterally, southward, relative to the earth on the right side of the frame, in a motion that accumulated 2.5 meters of displacement in under 2 seconds. The fault line between those two pieces of ground was visible. The motion was visible. The sound of it was on the recording. The camera kept recording. That footage, uploaded to social media by the facility's operator in the days after the earthquake, became one of the most scientifically significant videos in the history of seismology. A research team from Kyoto University published their analysis of it in the Seismic Record in July 2025. One of the lead scientists wrote that they had not anticipated the record would provide such a rich variety of detailed observations. A different research group described it in August 2025 with a headline that read, "The Earth didn't just crack, it curved." What the camera had captured was the Sagaing Fault, one of the longest and most active strike-slip fault systems on Earth, rupturing at the surface in real time from 10 meters away. The earthquake that produced that footage lasted approximately 85 seconds and killed more than 4,500 people. The Sagaing Fault runs 1,400 kilometers through the center of Myanmar, from the country's border with China in the north to the Andaman Sea in the south. It marks the boundary between the Burma microplate to the west and the Sunda plate to the east, two tectonic fragments sliding past each other at a rate of 18 to 49 millimeters per year. Over millions of years, that sliding has built, stressed, fractured, and rebuilt the fault into a long, straight, structurally mature surface, exactly the kind of fault, as it turned out, that produces the rarest and most destructive class of seismic events ever documented. The fault runs directly through or adjacent to Myanmar's major cities. Sagaing, a historic city of pagodas and monasteries just across the Irrawaddy River from Mandalay. Naypyidaw, the purpose-built capital relocated there in 2005. Mandalay itself, Myanmar's second-largest city, with approximately 1.5 million residents, sitting 16 kilometers from the fault trace. Large and damaging earthquakes have struck this system in 1930, 1946, and 1956. The segment that ruptured in March 2025 had not produced a major earthquake in approximately 100 to 130 years, energy waiting to be released in seconds. At 12:50:52 local time on March 28, it released. The earthquake initiated near Sagaing City, 14 kilometers northwest of Sagaing's center, at a depth of 10 kilometers. In the first 25 seconds of the rupture, it propagated simultaneously northward and southward along the fault. Then it transitioned to an overwhelmingly southward propagation, eventually rupturing a continuous section of fault extending approximately 500 kilometers from Singu City in Mandalay region in the north, southward past Sagaing, past Naypyidaw, terminating near Kyauktaga in Bago region. The rupture took 85 to 90 seconds to complete, the largest surface rupture ever recorded in Myanmar. The displacement was not uniform. Along the stretch between Singu and Sagaing, the ground slipped more than 5.7 meters, nearly 19 feet of lateral movement. Further south, slip generally exceeded 3 meters, peaking at 5 to 7 meters in places. The ground on one side of the fault had moved more than the length of an average car relative to the ground on the other side, in the time it takes to count to 3. 12 minutes after the main shock, a magnitude 6.7 aftershock struck directly beneath Mandalay International Airport. The death toll is estimated at between 3,600 and 5,449 people killed, with more than 11,000 injured. Independent estimates suggest the true number may be higher, given the military government's restricted reporting from conflict zones. The United Nations estimated that more than 17 million people across Myanmar were affected. In Mandalay district alone, approximately 1,870 people were killed, with reports suggesting that roughly half of all buildings were severely damaged or destroyed. Mandalay University buildings collapsed. In Sagaing, a city of centuries-old pagodas and temples, much of what had stood for hundreds of years did not survive 85 seconds of shaking. Myanmar's civil war, ongoing since the 2021 military coup, added a specific layer of disaster to the disaster. Communication blackouts across conflict zones meant rescue teams could not reach many affected areas for days. Key roads to Mandalay had been damaged, and aid moving through the region required navigating the patchwork of military and rebel-controlled territories across an active conflict. Thousands of unclaimed bodies remained trapped beneath collapsed structures weeks after the earthquake, raising urgent concerns about cholera and dengue outbreaks. The earthquake's effects did not stop at Myanmar's borders. In Bangkok, Thailand, 1,000 kilometers from the epicenter, a 33-story building under construction in the Chatuchak district collapsed entirely. At least 95 people died in that building alone. Across Bangkok, water sloshed from rooftop pools and high-rise residents poured into streets. Bangkok sits on a deep deposit of soft marine clay that extends 15 to 20 meters below the surface in much of the city. This clay amplifies long-period, low-frequency seismic energy that carries across hundreds of kilometers, matching the natural resonant frequency of tall buildings. Researchers at the Asian Institute of Technology had previously published warnings identifying the Sagaing Fault as a seismic risk for Bangkok. Elementary seismic design requirements were only added to Bangkok's building code in 2007. Older structures, and those built without rigorous code compliance, were particularly exposed. The 33-story building was not the only one. Now, the science. The March 28 earthquake was classified as a supershear event, a category that applies to fewer than a dozen earthquakes in the entire modern seismic record. In a typical earthquake, the rupture front propagates at roughly 70 to 80% of the speed of seismic shear waves through the surrounding rock. A supershear earthquake breaks that limit. The rupture front propagates faster than the shear waves it generates. The physical analogy is a sonic boom. As an aircraft exceeds the speed of sound, the pressure waves it creates cannot outrun it, and they stack into a shock front of concentrated energy that extends behind the aircraft at an angle. A supershear rupture does the same thing, creating a mock cone of focused seismic energy in the rock adjacent to the fault, energy that arrives at the surface as an impulse of shaking dramatically more intense than a subshear rupture of the same magnitude would produce. Supershear earthquakes tend to occur on faults that are long, straight, structurally simple, and mature, faults whose repeated ruptures have smoothed their geometry over millions of years. The Sagaing Fault qualifies on every count. Confirmed supershear events are rare. The 2002 Denali earthquake in Alaska and the 2018 Palu earthquake in Indonesia are among the handful on record. And then there is the camera footage. The security camera at the GP Energy solar facility captured a right lateral displacement of 2.5 meters as the rupture front passed beneath it. The footage showed the initial motion slightly oblique to the fault trace. The first 0.5 seconds of slip contained a small downward component in addition to the lateral motion, before transitioning to nearly pure right lateral strike slip. Jesse Kearse and Yoshihiro Kaneko of Kyoto University analyzed the footage frame by frame and published their findings in the Seismic Record in July 2025. Their paper's central finding was this: the slip trajectory was curved. This is the first time in the history of seismology that curved fault slip has been directly observed in real time. Curved slicken lines, the scratch marks faults leave on their own surfaces as the two sides slide, have been found on ancient exhumed fault planes worldwide. They show that slip traces a curving path reflecting the dynamic stresses inside the fault zone as it accelerates and decelerates. Scientists had modeled this behavior theoretically and simulated it computationally. They had never directly observed it. The Myanmar earthquake happened to produce a surface rupture directly through a solar facility that had a working security camera in exactly the right position. The slip velocity reached a peak of 3.2 meters per second before decelerating. The curvature of the trajectory, oblique in the first half second, then nearly pure right lateral, matched predictions from dynamic rupture simulations that had never been validated with direct observation before. There are three signals that scientists are watching as they model the implications of the March 28th rupture. The first is the northern segment of the Sagaing Fault. The 500-kilometer rupture extended from Singu southward. The fault segment north of Singu, which last ruptured in 1946, may have a shorter recurrence interval than the southern segments. The redistribution of stress from the 2025 event may be loading that northern section. Scientists from the Geodesy and Geodynamics study published after the earthquake flagged this as a priority for ongoing monitoring. The second is Bangkok's building inventory and code compliance. The 2025 event proved what researchers had warned, that long-distance seismic amplification in Bangkok's soft clay can cause tall building collapses from earthquakes 1,000 kilometers away. Thailand added basic seismic design requirements to its building code in 2007, but enforcement has been inconsistent, and hundreds of high-rise buildings predate the requirement. The third is the Kyoto University research itself. Jesse Kearse stated that the next phase of their work would use physics-based models to investigate the factors controlling fault behavior as revealed in the CCTV footage. If those models identify what conditions produce curved slip during the acceleration phase, They will provide new constraints on near-fault ground motion during supershear ruptures, which would improve seismic hazard assessments worldwide. A solar farm security camera recorded the Earth splitting open on a Friday afternoon in 2025 and kept recording. The footage it produced rewrote what scientists know about how faults move. The earthquake it recorded killed more than 4,500 people and collapsed a building 1,000 kilometers away. The fault that caused it is still there, and the segment to the north of Friday's rupture has not released its accumulated stress. Subscribe to stay ahead of what's coming.